Welcome back, honors. All right, so let's get after it this weekend. Kind of wrap up the medieval Catholic Church stuff, finish up talking rules, the growth into monasteries and convents, the idea of propagation of intelligence, actually ushered in by the Catholic Church. We didn't have the Catholic Church in the medieval period, we might not actually even have like the university system. So let's dive into it where we were actually leaving off on in class, right? So in class we were talking about Gothic style architecture, right? So we espoused the ideas of really, really long, tall windows, right? We talked about how everything comes to a point, draws one's attentions towards the heavens. Another really big component, though, that we didn't really get to. Oh, wait. Solid stone construction is another thing as well. Actually, something I found very, very interesting. Apparently, between the High Middle Age period from like 1050 to 1300 AD in France, I think over 80 large Gothic cathedrals were built in France alone, right? So the construction of Gothic cathedrals is actually going to move more stone during the High Middle Age period than the pyramids did themselves. So in the grand scheme of things, this architectural trait was a huge lurch forward and a great symbol of like the return of intelligence during the medieval period, and it's most closely associated with, of course, the Catholic Church. And again, it's a cathedral has to be ran by a bishop or a bishop's chair. And the big part about it is it serves as a bureaucratic unit for the Catholic Church during the medieval period, right? A districting or organizational system of derivating all the different areas into parishes that can be supervised over by a bishop, right? So, but getting back to the architecture, this is really cool just because I like to talk about it. So you see these this Gothic architectural church in particular, this is just a little story, you don't have to write this down. This particular church was actually earliestly used as a gate towards the eastern extent of the Roman Empire, right? So this is again St. Peter's in Austria, right? St. Peter's Cathedral in Austria, and in Vienna, Austria. And it's an amazing piece because this gate actually was the opening portal door, all right? It actually served as one of the gates of the eastern edge of the Roman Empire, right? Now, they would eventually then build the church off the back end of the entirety of this gate. But one of the really cool things about the front of it that I always thought was neat is you see these holes right here that were originally used for brackets. So those brackets actually originally held up a giant bone, right? And nobody actually knew where the bone came from. But the priests of the time in Austria always said that it actually is a symbol of the giants that used to roam the earth during the Old Testament period, the ones that were wiped out by Noah's flood, and the ones that used to actually be a part of this different old system of biblical text. And they were like, look, proof, right? We have this giant leg bone. Yeah, check it out. See? Told you. Everything's accurate. Turns out that they had actually found a woolly mammoth bone. So, stuff happens. Now, this is another really, really important part of a Gothic architectural scheme is vaulted ceilings, all right? Vaulted ceilings, V-A-U-L-T-E-D, vaulted ceilings. So these actually give the premise of large, wide open spaces. They increase the acoustical premises of the entire church, and then also not to mention the fact that they allow for these long, narrow stained glass windows to allow as much light streaming in as possible, right? So going forward, though, this is another church that I've actually visited in Europe. This is St. Nicholas Cathedral in Prague. It's inside the Castle district of Prague in the Czech Republic. Now, the reason why I include this guy, though, is because it's another great example of Gothic architectural schemes with this guy. Notice the really big round window right there? It's called a rose window, right? So rose windows also allow a huge amount of streaming light to come in and then focusing towards the tabernacle up front as well as the pulpit? Pulpit's the right word? Yeah? All right, so yeah, where's the pulpit where the priest resides, right? So this, though, most important piece of Gothic architecture, probably when it ever comes to the schemes of the church itself, right? Giving it the tall, narrow looks, right, from the front and also allowing for these vaulted ceilings are these bad boys, right? They're called flying, F-L-Y-I-N-G, flying buttresses, right? Flying buttresses, actually, very cool architectural scheme that distribute the weight of the roof to the outsides of the building, and it actually holds up those vaulted ceilings from the outside or the exterior, right? So that right there is a flying buttress. Actually adorned on top with these little pinnacles. Yeah, pinnacles actually adorn the tops of most flying buttresses to keep giving it that everything comes to a point Gothic feel, right? But these are on the backside of the St. Nicholas Church in Prague. So that's a flying buttress, right? Actually holds the roof up from the exterior. Now, continuing forward, this is the most famous piece of Gothic architecture you probably know of. The dual bell towers, the Hunchback Quasimodo running around in there, right? This is Notre Dame in France, right? And as well as you can see is right here, again, rose windows, stained glass, vaulted ceilings, flying buttress, rose window, stained glass, blah, 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 da, 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 right? Gothic architectural schemes during the Catholic Church are very important. Another big reason why they're so important, though, is it's showing the return of financial independence of an organization during the medieval period, right? These churches require money to build. Actually, early on, the people paying for these churches are the monarchs of these growing, fledgling little countries in Europe following the fall of Rome. Now, ironically enough, the bishop chose where it would be built and how it would be built, but the return of funds to actually build these things is a very, very important piece, right? So, and then right here as well, you have, of course, the gargoyles that actually adorn many of these other churches as well. So, going forward, though, let's talk really quickly about the Catholic Church views of the roles of women, right? So, now, first and foremost, they did believe that all were equal before the eyes of God, right? So, they believed that all were equal before the eyes of God. However, in the medieval Catholic Church, they viewed women as very weak and easily led to sin, right? A big component of the medieval Catholic Church is preaching the ideal woman, right? The ideal woman who chastely gives her life to her son and the progression of humanity. Of course, we're talking about none other than Mary, right? So Mary becomes a huge focal point in the medieval Catholic Church, as she should be, right? So continuing forward, though, of course, Mary, right? Getting into it, though, these are very important. Monasteries and convents, right? So a monastery and a convent is something you probably know of very well already. Now, one of the important pieces about the monastery and convent system of the medieval Catholic Church during the, we'll say, 1000s to 1300s is the propagation of intelligence, right? So, really quickly, when you devote your entire life to your religion during the Catholic faith, you're known as a monk or a nun, right? Now, monks, of course, living in monasteries and the nuns living in convents. The most important thing that one of the occupations that many of these people did during the medieval period was actually the transcribing of intelligence, all right? So what a lot of monks would actually do during the various vows of silence, they would actually go to places called in symposium, right? Where they would actually literally copy manuscripts from one book to another, okay? So now, if you've got these things rolling forward in the ideas of copying of intelligence, propagating of intelligence, making more of a certain text or idea, and then pushing it out onto the world, you now are going to grow different ideas like the university system, which is what we'll get to here in a second. But the big thing about the monasteries and the convents is they provide basic health care, education, they provide places to sleep for weary travelers. They became a very integral part of the medieval Catholic community, right? Now, going forward, again, really quickly, just so you have a heads up, this, of course, is all in reference to the medieval Catholic Church going from about the 1000s to the 1300s. This is not a commentary on the current-day Catholic Church, right? Now, the growth also, though, of the monastery and convent system was subject of one very famous individual, Saint Benedict, right? Now, for those historians out there that are watching this, some of you were probably thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute, Saint Benedict was active during the 600s AD, and you're in the 1000s AD. This is shenanigans. All right, so, well, biggest thing about it is St. Benedict's impact on the ideas of monastic life, right? The rules that would govern many of the priests, monks, nuns that would actually go forward in the medieval Catholic faith, right? And they actually established a set of rules called the Benedictine rule, right? Now, the Benedictine rule, though, doesn't include three very important ones that come up later and lead to this big trend called the Reformation during the 1500s of Europe. The Benedictine rules originally stated things like, you have to have a light on whenever you sleep if you're a monk or a nun. You have to sleep in your, I guess, habit or priestly garb is going to be the words I'm going to use here. You had to sleep in those things so you could actually get up and be ready to preach at any moment. It also regulated their diet. They weren't allowed to eat cloven-hooved animals. They had to get a certain amount of sleep. They had to spend a certain number of hours in symposium copying manuscripts, right? A lot of different ideas right there. Now, here's the big thing going forward, though. These were added around the 1100s AD, at the height of the Catholic Church power, right? They were like these three in particular: obedience to the church leader, poverty, and chastity, right? So now these three things are of genius intelligence when it comes to the Catholic Church because it's propagating a positive idea of the faith during the medieval period, right? Obedience to the church leader as in following your patriarch, your pope, right? Poverty as in not trying to like seek financial gain for the preachings of the Catholic faith, and then also chastity as being able to focus your life onto the Catholic faith itself, right? But these three things are very important going forward. Make sure you put a star next to them or highlight them, circle them, do whatever you got to do, right? Now, also, though, monasteries and convents are going to begin to retain a lot of that information when they actually are beginning to copy these early manuscripts and things like that. They house the first libraries in Europe and start some of the earliest universities, right? Now, really, really quickly, the very first universities were not actually brought in. I love this picture. They're so happy. Now, the very first universities were not a European Catholic idea. They were actually borrowed from the North African Muslim Empire, right? So the universities were actually taken from the Islamic people that were set up in Spain, right? So the earliest universities were actually like propagated by the people of the Islamic faith because they had actually held on to a lot of the ancient antiquity texts of ancient Greece and Rome and had them translated into Arabic, and they were using them in the pushing forward of their intellectual value. These things would then be translated back into Latin in places like the Andalusians and the areas of southern Spain, where they would also then be kind of gifted back to the world of Europe to actually be able to be used in the universities and in the pushing forward of intelligence, right? And then after the monasteries and convent system actually popped up due to the Catholic Church, though, then you start seeing a lot of different monasteries or a lot of different universities popping up all over Europe. Some in the north of France, some in the south of France, some in the north of Italy, some in the you eventually in the 1100s had Cambridge and Oxford show up in England, right? So very, very important piece of the Catholic faith, though. Now, going forward, though, church power, though, big important thing, begins to grow during the high Middle Ages, right? Well, first of all, when we're talking about power, we got to talk about then keeping order, right? So how would the church actually help keep order during this time period? What would you do to try and prevent someone from acting out of the laws of the Catholic faith or actually use it to kind of rein in the people of the medieval period? Well, the big one is going to be excommunication, right? So excommunication was the ultimate punishment in the Catholic Church, right? The ultimate punishment for the layman, the regular, the person walking around Europe, right? When you are excommunicated, you would be kicked out of the church, right? Which made it unable for you to receive the sacraments or a Christian burial. And many of the people are the belief is that the excommunication from the church is going to lead to an eternity in the HE bad place, right? I don't really like to say the word itself on the internet. I don't want to just be throwing it out there. So excommunication is a very important idea in the medieval Catholic faith structure, right? Now, going forward, though, some of you are now thinking to yourself, where you're like, wait a minute. So, hypothetically, I'm pretty confident that many of these lords and nobles and people like that probably took advantage of the Catholic Church, right? Tried to twist their power, tried to, subvert the power of the Catholic Church over their people. So, how do you punish them? The big one that they did for them was actually called an interdict, right? An interdict or an interdiction is going to be the punishment for wealthy nobles, princes, even kings at some points, right? Actually, a couple of the very famous disputes is actually between Gregory VII and Henry IV of Germany, or well, not Germany at the time, but the Holy Roman Empire, and they actually would excommunicate each other, Henry was excommunicated by the Pope at the time, more than once, and so punishment for powerful nobles, though, why? Because an interdiction was an order that actually excluded an entire town or region or kingdom from receiving sacraments. So this is actually trying to encourage revolts by the Catholic Church to try and actually make things boil up over political tension to try and, again, get the king or lord back into line. Now, where are we going? There it is. The church also is going to become more and more of a political unit during the High Middle Ages, and popes are eventually going to claim that power of papal supremacy over kings and rulers, right? Church power is going to continue to grow and leap forward as time goes on and just keep pushing and pushing and pushing, right? Now, one of the biggest times that they actually came to be we already know what that is. We had that in the last presentation. Henry IV, Gregory VII, we know those guys. So now, church power is going to reach its height, though, in the 1200s. The very first crusade was actually launched in the 1090s, but church power is going to reach its height around the 1200s, right before the Third Crusade. All right, now, due to the fact that the First Crusade actually proved very economically prosperous for a lot of people in Europe. So now, going forward, though, the idea of one nun throwing a snowball at another nun, like, makes my day, right? Now, this is a very important premise, though, okay? The Inquisition was a church court established during the High Middle Ages to try and actually make a functional system for punishing heretics, right? So now, what the Inquisition is a special church court that punishes heretics, right? Seeing its earliest establishments during the Middle Ages, during the, like, political structure of Europe. First of all, we got to describe what a heretic is, right? A heretic is a person who speaks out against the church or church practices that they don't believe in, right? So, well, publicly dismissing or going against the church is not the best idea, right? So, because what's going to end up happening is convicted heretics were sometimes burned at the stake and even tortured, right? So, this is kind of the marking of the beginning of the twist and the turn in the Catholic faith towards overarching power and corrupt individuals, not the faith being corrupt, but corrupt individuals within the church, trying to exert more power than necessary, right? So what we're going to do now, though, is we're going to stop right here, and we're going to talk about a couple of the different Inquisition premises and political power struggles during the High Middle Ages going forward, and we're just going to kind of wrap it up right here. But just wanted to kind of keep it pretty short and brief, just kind of discuss the Catholic Church and its influence on the lives of the people during the Middle Ages. And then before we get into things like the growth of England, political power, nation states being birthed during the Middle Ages, and then getting into like the Crusade debacle during the 1090s all the way up till, like, theoretically speaking, the 1300s. But that's it. All right, so we're going to wrap it up there. I'll see you guys on Monday. Have a great afternoon, or have a great weekend. Go Birds. Beat the Cowboys. I'll see you guys on Monday.